Welcome to our installment of Transition Tuesday, the first one for the new year 2026. I am so happy that we have Dan Simon here with us today. We're going to learn about his career in education that's led to college and career advising, something that we all need to worry about. We all need to worry about as parents. Dan, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Tony, thank you so much. I've enjoyed our conversations leading up to this and excited about our conversation today for sure.
Well, we got to get right into this, right? Or we're going to lose people because we may not be the most famous or best looking guys ever, but I think we got something for our population. So, what makes you an expert in college and career advising?
Oh man, Tony. So I guess I could say there's a couple of different factors. One is father of 6 adult children that have all walked a different path to their successful careers. Some was community college to the full-time university route. Some were, I have a military academy graduate. I have a couple with master's degrees. I have a couple that did transfers after starting at one school. So on the personal side, I have that life experience. But on the professional side, I've spent over 30 years as an adolescent educator. Started in middle school, moved to high school as a high school principal, superintendent, both public and private, just building relationships with kids and always focusing on what's next. And when we talk about what's next, how do we make sure we get there? We're doing all the right things to get to whatever's next. And what's next that's for one student isn't necessarily what's best for the students sitting next to them at the lunch table. So that led for me to a kind of a retirement career in focusing just on working with students on identifying that calling, if you will, to what's next, and then helping them make the right decisions that are going to lead them down the path to success.
And Dan, you're really newer to the military community as far as offering your services for the military. We want to talk about that, but upfront, specifically in dealing with special operations community, we really care about who is this guy, and you talked about it. And so I just want to bring up real quick, this is from High Technology High School's website, and this is where you worked. And one thing you'll see is the #1 STEM high school in the United States of America multiple times. So when we bring people into our community, right, they need to be battle tested,
right,
and trusted. So with college advising, I would think of my experience in school, you had your guidance counselor, right? They had to help you with everything. And it was kind of one-on-one with the student with a kind of a problem being, I already didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
So I think you take a little bit of a different approach with how you engage with parents as well.
Yeah. Guidance counselors, give them a lot of credit for what they do, but ratios are almost impossible, right? I mean, you've got kids that, sometimes 125, 150 to 1 counselor. The students that are aware of the needs, right, are often in the counselor's office often. But it's always been about the ones who, as you said, the ones who don't know what they don't know. Perhaps they have a parent who isn't experienced in the journey themselves. And so all too often we get to that place where it's not that it's too late, but the kinds of activities, the kinds of engagements that you would be looking to build on your portfolio, that time has passed you by. And so the relational aspect of the advising and the coaching is to start having those conversations early on so you can start guiding students to experiences, right? There is no checklist. There's no cookie cutter approach that works for every student. But you don't know that until you know the student, until you have a relationship with the student to be able to ask the right questions to say, I think the pathway for you might be more vocational, might be trade. It might be service oriented. It might be college. It might be community college first. It might be a gap year, right, to get experience. So it all comes down to asking questions, building a relationship, and then providing resources to guide that student on the path. You can't create a program for this that works the same for every child, every student. So that's what I have built, is the idea of, we don't even talk about what's next until we get to know each other and get comfortable with each other first.
So when you talk early, you got to help me. I need a starting point. So when you tell me early, then for a typical high school student, because we're really going to focus our relationship on moving forward, is the high school students of active duty and veterans. And we got something really special coming up here in Columbus that we'll tease out until the end. So when in that high school time, then I would think first day of freshman year, you might want them to care about their locker code first. When would you actually start to engage in conversation about the future, so that they can also enjoy, right, and kind of live in the present a little bit?
It's an excellent question. I think most would say that you start the college conversation, right? Sometime middle of junior year is when it starts to really matter. I think it's too late, because quite honestly, at that point, you've lost almost 2.5 years of potential experiences, right? Where I always tease out with kids the idea of saying, look, you can do something just to try it out. And what that's going to tell you is one of two things. Either, I love that, and I'm really glad I did it, and now I'm locked in on that. Or, I'm really glad I did that because I want nothing to do with that in my future. Like, I want to be as far away from that as possible. And what happens a lot of times is when you start this process too late, like a young woman I was just talking to even earlier today, Tony, told me about her experience starting freshman year with a major. And then she ended up changing a major, right? Lost an entire freshman year. And I said, before you started, had you done any research? Had you had any shadowing experience? Had you done any? There was nothing, right? So when you ask about the ideal starting time, engaging in very high level, like overarching, kind of not specific conversations about future and what makes you happy and what gets you out of bed every morning. You can start those conversations in 8th grade, moving into 9th grade as they start the high school career, because you want them to know high school matters. Every experience matters in shaping what's next. And so you don't want to waste a single day if you can help it. So if you were to ask me when you would start, I would say end of 8th grade, as they're starting high school, start encouraging and motivating students to recognize that every day, every experience counts.
Do you find yourself, and 100% a leading question, and this is so much for me, more than me than the audience, because I do have a teenage child, be going into his, currently in sophomore year, be going into his junior year. And we have made getting to college the end goal with little talk and discussion. Not in my family. This is one thing I think we're doing right, but little discussion of what you actually want to do with that degree. It's as if this milestone of this college is the end all be all. How did you flush that out pretty early in conversations? What does that look like, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, so I'm always talking to students about what's plan B and what's plan C, right? What's the pivot? So we often will talk about other things that they enjoy, other classes or subjects that they like, and talk about perhaps a minor or some kind of focus in electives, right? So that if you are in the process of studying a particular pathway and you pivot, you don't want to lose all that time, right? And we're talking again specifically about college-bound students, right? That you don't want to lose that. So maybe you pivot, and now those classes you were taking as more electives now become your major courses, and the major courses now become your electives, and you don't lose any time, right? So we're always talking about what else could it be? What else could it be? But the conversation starts with, where do you see yourself in 10 years, right? What do you want to be doing 10 years from now? And then the questions of, how do you get there? And then we kind of almost backwards design it, right? The educator in me is always in that process, right? Of let's work backwards to today. What would you have to be doing today to start building the foundation to ensure that you can be there in 10 years, right? And along the way, what are those questions you're going to need clarity on to decide if that's the way you're going to continue to move or if you're going to pivot away from that? And so when you talk about majors, Tony, there's also the great question of what do you do with that major, right? What are the careers that you can find yourself doing? And I spend a lot of time talking about career versus vocation also, because they're not the same thing necessarily. Because you can talk about something that you do to put food on the table, right? To pay your mortgage, to make sure your bills are paid. But then you also have that vocational side sometimes where you do it because it's where you find fulfillment. It's where you find your greatest passion is spent. It's where you find your greatest ability to impact society and culture comes, right? So they aren't always the same thing. And so that's why I'm also encouraging students to not just pursue what they're good at, but sometimes alongside of that, it's also doing what they enjoy. They're not always the same thing, but they're also not mutually exclusive, right? So sometimes you have to be able to do both and recognize that they both serve a different purpose. So those conversations are happening all the time, right from the very beginning, as we find out what you're good at and also what you're passionate about, and try to find the best lane to kind of navigate that down the road.
I like it. And it's constant, and it can change. They're young people. They're allowed to change. It's okay that you don't end up as a doctor or a lawyer, like so many kids will kind of throw out there because they believe that is success.
Right.
But here's a hard one. I don't even know how to phrase this question. I find that a lot of kids who expect to go to college don't work. And they aren't working in high school specifically. They're not working in anything related to what they might want to do as a grown-up. And I feel like we've gotten in this, there's kind of a little bit of a counterculture movement. It's not against college. It is about the artificial 18-year grown-up. You need to go to college for these experiences, where back in the day, the goal was to mature people quicker, not longer. How do you advise in there, and do you try to ensure that they're doing the experiences where they're touching what they might want to do? What does that look like?
Yes, 100%, Tony. That I'll go back to that example I used earlier when I asked the young lady, like, okay, you have chosen a major, right? And after a year, you pivoted. But I asked her, before you went into that major, had you observed anyone? Had you researched what it requires? No. And of course, it was pre-medical, right? I mean, that was, again, I'm going to be a doctor, right? Or I'm going to be a lawyer, as you just mentioned. And so that's typically the case when I'm talking to students who are in transition or pivoting or not sure. So again, going back to that early conversation, as early as 9th grade, like summers matter. Like if I could shadow someone just one Saturday morning who does something that I think I might want to do as in my future, I'd love to just spend a day in the life. Just see what they do. And, if they're in a career that's engaging with people and I'm a little more of an introvert, then maybe I don't want to get involved in that because it's not what I thought it was. Or on the other hand, right, if I'm an extrovert and I need to engage with people and I find myself in a career option where I'm kind of at a desk doing research, like honestly, Tony, my original career choice was actuarial science, right? Now, you and I have known each other for a little while and conversation, right? Like I could never see myself in a position now, and I was mathematically gifted, still am, right? But the engagement with people, the relationship building isn't really part of that career, right? Or it's not a necessary skill. So a lot of assessments these days are identifying, again, not only your career leaning, but also your personality type, and trying to find the two together. And that's where you can make a suggestion to a student. You're interested in this subject, but what would you do with that down the road? What are your options? So this same young lady, she just keeps coming up as an example, right? Pivoted out of pre-med into political science. but has openly said, I love political science. I love the debate, whatever, but I don't think I would want to pursue a career in political science. So then the follow-up question is, well, then why are you pursuing it as a major? Like, you could pursue political science as a minor or take electives in it because it interests you and you might find yourself there. But how is majoring in that going to set you up for a career if you're already saying it's not a career that you would be interested in pursuing? So there is that matching of experiences. Like, you can't just live it out through what someone else says about it. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to get the opportunities and the experiences. And I also coach students, Tony, in this process of advocating for themselves, right? So they have to be the ones to maybe go knock on the door of a local employer who serves in that capacity to say, hey, I'm a high school sophomore. I think I'm really interested in this career, but I'm really not sure exactly what, you do every day. Could we have a conversation? Can I chat? Like, it builds those life skills they need anyway, but it also gives them that opportunity again to either walk away saying, oh yeah, I found my career, or thank you for your time. You just gave me clarity and something I can cross off my list, right? So it's all about getting those experiences early on and advocating for yourself to find those opportunities, because they're not always going to come and find you.
Well, I love the idea, and it's becoming more clear why the parents are involved with this too, because maybe they just need to hear it from another adult, and the ability of a parent to be able to help with the internships and to do those introductions and realize, oh, I'm actually the person who can help advocate for my kid. So I love that. So now I'm going to do what I think is a hard question.
Okay.
Because, going to college, right? Those that want to attend top schools, there is very much something to any degree from a top school may put you into a network that potentially you don't have access to by going to maybe a local or regional school. And that local or regional schools could be good, but there also might be local or regional where there's not a lot of job opportunities.
Right.
So we tend, especially high achievers, to want to chase prestigious schools. Now, I have feelings on that, but I would like to hear what type of questions would you kind of ask to figure out someone's intent and the true why? Because I think you'd have to unwrap the true why there and see if it's even relevant.
Right, 100%, Tony. I think you just hit it, right? I mean, the question always, and I do work with a lot of clients. In fact, the beginning of my career, I shadowed an expert in this field too, and kind of learned the ropes from him. And these are all students that are looking at Ivy League schools. I mean, that the high school that I was principal, that was number one. I mean, those students were only looking at those top tier colleges and universities. But the question was always why, right? And most of the time it stood to, well, my parents have been talking to other parents, and right. And so it's often not about the kid's decision. And so I'll give you a perfect example of this. When I was principal at the high schools back in New Jersey, right? And so we would talk often at parent meetings, and I would say, be careful what you promise your child about their college education, right? Because I would almost guarantee that a student who could get accepted to MIT could also get accepted to NJIT. The difference was going to be NJIT was going to offer you a full scholarship, right? 100% paid for. MIT isn't going to offer you a dime, right? And so for the next 4 years of your education, you have to make the decision, is having the M instead of the NJ in front of the IT worth $300,000 to you, right? Because that's the difference between going to a top tier prestigious school with no financial aid support potentially, right? Versus a school that might be a 1B or a 1C by comparison, but still provide you with a phenomenal experience with state-of-the-art facilities, right? And cost you nothing. And so then you begin to have the conversation of, well, what's after that? Am I going directly into the workforce from there, or am I getting into graduate school And is it really then more about the graduate school than it is about the undergraduate school? And then when you say, well, what's the determination there? Then you start thinking about, what kind of relationship do I have with my professors? What kind of hands-on experiences am I getting in doing the research, in maybe even getting published, or maybe even getting my name on a patent, right? And where that happens, where are those opportunities for that to take place? And so you have to take the bigger picture of the whole experience, and not just what's going to be on that piece of paper at the end of 4 years, but what's 5 years after that. And then what's 5 years after that. And so as you begin to think about these top tier universities, my question is always, what's your goal for after your undergraduate experience? And then we can start looking at other options. When students start doing the research on schools that are available, I would say it's 100% of the time they start discovering schools they've never even heard of that turn out to be phenomenal matches for them in terms of size, in terms of climate, in terms of so many features that they don't have accessible to them at those top elite schools. So if that's what you want, and we go through the series of questions and it's what you want, of course I'm going to support you in that. But I just don't want it to ever be because I think that's what I have to do if I want to have a successful career, is I have to have that name in front of my degree. And that's just not the reality.
Well, I love it. I mean, we like to say, in terms of planning in the military, everybody's a little green army, man. Like, you've got to go through the process. At the end of the day, everybody's also a unicorn too. You only got one life to live. And I think what I love about what you do, and the reason we're going to bring you down here to Columbus, Georgia, to talk to our military, active duty, and veteran kids in a couple of venues. The reason we're going to do that is so that they can have this experience of college is going to happen and it's going to be over. All right. What you don't want to have happen is start making it experiences that happen and are over, like marriages, too early. You know, because college is going to happen to be over. If you do it right, it will be a good time. I can promise you that. But the idea that place is going to bring you more happiness than what you provide. So let's talk about us bringing you down to Columbus, Georgia. We have the opportunity on April 16th at Golden Park for 10 students with one parent to meet Dan. Short presentation, suite access prior to our Cleanstones game on the 16th. So you'll get in at 6. You'll be able to hear and meet with Dan early and often throughout the entire game. And Dan, we're super excited for you to be down here because you're doing so much now, specifically with the soft community. Yeah. We're excited for you to start with the Honor Foundation, right? One of the organizations that we partner with. We will tell our Rangers, depending on what they're looking to do, that is a phenomenal organization. You already work with, and near and dear to everyone's heart and soft, Special Operations Warrior Fund, the organization that is responsible for the education funding for our fallen combat and in training special operators. And Dan, this man is one of the education counselors who ensures that the donor's money, right, cannot go to a better cause. Cannot go to a better cause, but Dan ensures that then those students have an opportunity, once again, to kind of start with their why and it not just be about college. So we're excited to bring you down here. Dan, you have any final closing comments for the group?
I feel like the last 35 years of work in the space with adolescents has led me to this place of focusing my time and attention on military families and supporting military families, not only because of my son and my son-in-law both being first lieutenants currently serving, but having been a director recently at a school where there were a lot of military adolescents who just seemed to feel as if they had no advocates, feeling as if like they just were always kind of place to place and location to location. There was no consistent voice that was really there kind of walking with them along the whole journey. For me, that was it. I said, well, then that's where I'm called to be, is to come alongside them and to come alongside their families. They've sacrificed so much for us that for me, at the end of my career, having been brought into this space and had a lot of success, I want to be able to pour back into the community in that way. So I am so excited and grateful, Tony, for the opportunity to come down and just see this as the beginning of what I hope will be a fruitful relationship with yours and many other military family support organizations.
Our guys are known for going a little further, faster, and fighting a little harder. And we would be wise to use everything in our toolkit. And you're part of that family, Dan. We appreciate it. This is actually filmed before Christmas. So I'd be remiss if I didn't end by wishing Dan and your extended family, your large family, will all be at home, a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, Tony. Same to you, man.
All right, Rangers lead the way.